came and said, I am. Quite literally meaning Yahweh in a sense. To them, like we hear the statement like, I am. And you're like, I am what? Like, what are you? But to Jesus at that time and the situation of that time, for him to come and say, I am. Wow, this is the same as me coming up here and saying like, hello, I'd like to introduce myself. I am God. Right? I mean, you're either going to laugh at the person, you're either going to dismiss them as some kind of person that's a couple of french fries short of a Happy Meal. Like, man, like, you crazy. Like, I don't know what's really going on with this person, but maybe entertaining for a moment. And then, like, let's just pass them by. Or you're going to say, well, prove it. And that's what people started doing to Jesus in some sense. They started challenging him like, hey, if you really are God, then get off this cross. Right? If you really are God, then why are you doing this on the Sabbath day? They're trying to kind of put him inside of these quandaries because he had a really valid claim to his divinity. But Archbishop Fulton Sheen in his book Life of Christ says if you want to validate a claim to divinity, you have to use two things. You have to use history and you have to use reason. Why? Because history, we live in it. We're part of it. And we learn from it, and it will continue on even after we are gone. How many of you have ever seen George Washington? Anybody? Some people are like in your mind, like, well, on a dollar bill. I saw him once. I have, right? You've never actually seen the man, George. That's what I would call him back in the day. Like, what's up, George? Right? You never went up to George and like touched George, like, hey George, how are you? You never went up to him, probably back in that day with, well, they didn't really have showers the way that we do and so on. You might go up to him and be like, George, you got a little bit of a smell on you today. Like, you've never really smelt George, right? You've never touched him, you've never smelt him. Have you ever heard his voice? No, right? I mean, how do we know things? We know things through our senses. We touch them, we taste them. Have you ever tasted? That's weird, right? We don't taste George, right? You touch it, you taste it, you see it, you hear it. Am I missing one? And you smell it, right? But we've never done that to George. Well, how do you know that George actually existed in time and space as a human person? Well, you read the books, right? I mean, that's probably where you first heard about him in a history book. And you might ask yourself, well, maybe you don't ask yourself, and I don't think many people do, ask themselves when they're sitting inside of their history class, like, how do we know that this is true? How do we know that George Washington actually said this thing, or wrote this thing, or did this thing, or battled here, or won here, or lost here? How do we know these things? We kind of trust in the story that history tells us, right? But then when it comes to this book, people are like, well, wait, like the Bible's different though. Well, yeah, it's not a book that is a history book. It's technically supposed to be a book of faith. But does it have history in it? Yeah. Does it have things that can be backed up through archaeological findings? Yes. Does this book, comparatively to any other book that was written during its time period, have more manuscripts? I mean, over 200 manuscripts that are actually found comparatively to, for instance, the Iliad, which is another one that only has maybe about 10 manuscripts. You're talking like 10 comparatively to 200 or more. Like, which one is more accurate in this sense? We look at the Iliad and we read it and we're like, oh, that's a nice story that tells us some kind of truth, that tells us a little bit of that time period. We look at this book and some people will say, well, I don't know that I can trust it. It's supposed to be divinely inspired. What does that mean? Right? Because it's a book of faith, but it does have historical things inside of it. And we can look at it and at least start with one foundational reality, that there was a man that lived 2,020 years ago. His name was Jesus. He was from where? Not Bethlehem, Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem. I'll get to that one later. He was from a town, Nazareth, and in a region of Galilee, right? And his mom and his dad were Mary and Joseph, and they had parents, and they were so on and so forth. And these things are traced and passed down, right? Oftentimes through oral tradition. And a lot of people say, well, like, how can we really trust this thing called oral tradition? Like, well, how can we trust history then? Would be my question. Because all of it is passed down. First, we experience it, and then we share it. And then, yes, we write things down. But let's just ask yourself a really interesting question. Like, think of a moment in your life that rocked your world, that changed you, who you are, that makes you the person that you believe yourself to be today. I look at myself personally, and I think of 6th grade. My brother was killed in a tragic car accident on his way to church on Super Bowl Sunday instead of coming home for the party. Like, boom, phone call rang. Like, I remember everything about that night, even though I never wanted it to happen, right? I think of the time period when I got married, a beautiful occasion in my life, most joyous occasion in my life. For the first time that my wife told me, hey, honey, I'm pregnant, like, and the tears that we shared. Like, these are impactful moments of our life that we just don't forget, right? Think of the impactful moments inside of your life that you won't forget. Will you tell it accurately? Even if you didn't want it to happen? I didn't want my brother to die. I'm not going to lie about that night and say, like, yeah, I was happy. No, I was torn apart for years. You know? I'm not going to lie about the location I was in. I'm not going to lie about who came to my house. My street was flooded with people. Quite literally, like, cars all down the entire street. And I'm looking outside like, my brother knew this many people? Like, I don't know half these people that are here, but I know you. Like, Henry, come here, bro, let me give you a hug. I've known you since I was a kid. My dad, and what my dad said to me when he came inside of the home and was sobbing, this 6'3", 250-pound policeman that never cried, came in sobbing into my house, knelt me down and said, your brother's gone. And I looked at him, not crying at all, thinking like, what are you talking about? He's supposed to come home. I was a young kid. I didn't get what was going on at this time. And when I tell these stories that are meaningful and impactful inside of my life, hey, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't change a thing, despite it being a great tragedy or a great joy inside of my life. Imagine meeting Jesus and seeing him work a miracle, or watch him multiply fish and loaves, or watch your Savior die on the cross. Watch your Savior, this man that you followed for 3 years, get buried inside of a tomb. These things that you would forget. The man that you left everything behind. Now he's dead. And where are you? You're hiding out of fear of your own life. You gonna come out? Well, only when you don't fear losing your life anymore, for the sake of the gospel message. And they did. And that message continued on, thankfully, by the heroic ventures of those first disciples and apostles. History, how beautiful it is and how important it is to bring about a valid claim to divinity. But once again, like I said, there have been kings, there have been emperors, there have been just regular, ordinary people that have come and said, hi, I'm God. And have had people follow them, and have had people worship them and bring them homage. But reason becomes another really big thing. Because we're reasonable beings. We have an intellect that allows us not to just know things, but we can understand things. Beyond just understanding things, because we're made in God's image and likeness, we can be creative and imaginative and go outside of the bounds of, well, what is. For instance, think of, I don't know, I've never seen a gargoyle. I'd like to hope that they actually existed at one point in time, like a unicorn, right? I don't know why they call it the unicorn. It's not a corn on their head. I don't know, but it is just one. Interestingly enough, corn in Latin is horn, You can actually buy a unicorn online too. It's interesting. You can adopt unicorns. It's fascinating. Imagine like getting a box with nothing in it and being like, yeah, I just adopted a unicorn. Right? Because they don't actually exist, right? So, but we can test things, right? We can use our reason and think about things logically. And here becomes the fascinating thing to me, personally. You know, we can't prove that God exists. We also can't disprove that God exists, right? And this is a fascinating thing. This is like the world of apologetics, right? That we can't actually prove that God exists. We also cannot prove that God does not exist. Because, well, let's really think about it. If we could actually prove that God exists, then what's this thing called faith? Do I have to really have it? Nope. Because I know it. Like, you don't have to sit here and be like, I believe that this is a chair. No, this is a chair. Whether you believe it to be a chair or not, it is a chair. I can use it like against its purpose and stand on it, like, but it's rightfully, purposefully a chair. I don't have to believe that 2 + 2 equals what? 4, right? I can look at one chair, another chair, 2 chairs, 2 more chairs. Add them together and I have 4 chairs, right? I don't have to believe that a circle is a circle or a square is a square. These different things, but just proven for us by knowledge and reason and understanding. But this thing about God, like, is there a God or is there not a God? Well, you can't prove it. Science can't prove it. Science can't disprove it. Likewise, reason can't prove it. It also can't disprove it. So what are we really left with in terms of this word proof? It's more so, Peter Kreeft actually says, it's more so kind of like a bunch of probablys. A lot of probablys lead up to, well, a probable. Right? In other words, Peter Kreeft uses a really good example. It is very probable that this ceiling is not going to drop on us right now. But can you prove that the ceiling is not going to drop on us now for sure? No, you can't really prove it. But you can probably say UCLA has taken proper precautions because of insurance things, and well, people will be sitting in these chairs, that they get these ceilings checked every once in a while, and that the foundations were built according to a particular code, and they used actual geometry to build it in the first place, and they use 2 + 2 = 4, so that they're doing their math right when people actually come into this building. More than likely than not, this building will not fall on people while they're sitting here. That would be a bad thing, would it not? Yes. So we kind of, in some sense, take faith and come in here and sit in the probably. I don't know, whenever you get on the road, I drove, and it's crazy in Las Vegas, it's crazy in Los Angeles as well, right? You get on the road, are you sure that you will not get ran over by another person that is driving next to you? Do you have absolute proof that they're not going to just kind of do one of these things just for fun? Like, no, we take faith in the what? Well, more than likely, probably people are going to respect the rules of the road. And they're going to drive in their own lane, and they're going to look behind them when they're about to make a turn into my lane. Probably. Do we have a certainty of it? No. Right? We live our life, and I can use a bunch of other examples as we continue on. When you eat your food, do you know for certain that you're not going to get poisoned by that food? and have some kind of food poisoning because it wasn't cooked properly. No, we kind of take faith in the person that's preparing that food, and we say, hey, when I eat this burger, more than likely not, I am not going to get injured by it. We live our life not so much by a bunch of proofs, but more so by a lot of probabilities. Hi, my name's Mike Brown. Do you know that for sure? So probably it is my name, but could I be lying to you? Yeah. Am I lying to you? No, my name is actually Michael Brown. But there's so many Michael Browns out there that I had to go with a Mike C and put my initial in there so that people don't get my name mixed up when they're searching for me to speak at places, whatever it may be, you know? Do you know that your parents are your parents? Have you ever checked your birth certificate? You're gonna go home and be like, whoa! Like, let me see that birth certificate right now! Right? But you have probably lived your entire life thinking like, oh, I could just take faith. That's my mom, that's my dad. How do you know they didn't exchange you at the doctor's office? I'm just saying, probably they didn't. But you know for sure. Right? And there are ways that you can check those different things, but what am I getting at? You know, reason allows for us to look at, yeah, those things that we can see for certain. We can also look at, hey, there's a lot of probabilities. If I go out today, probably won't die today, but I don't know that for sure, do I? I always look at like the relationships that we engage in, like, wow, we take so much faith that this person is actually telling me who they really are. There was a person that started college and he was a black man and he thought it would be funny to kind of, well, he was black, he did a really good African accent, and he thought it would be funny on the first day of like orientation to pretend like he was from this native place in Africa. And he talked with it, he dressed in the garb, he talked with this African accent, and people walked up to him like, hey, do you have any pets? He was like, yeah, I got a cheetah in my backyard. And they believed him. He lived an entire year in a false persona, and then he fell in love with a girl and had to like tell the truth because he couldn't lie to her anymore. But like, how do we know the people that we actually meet are telling us legitimately truth? We live a lot by faith. And that faith is based off of a lot of, well, probably. And it's okay to live off of those probablys because if they coincide with what is reasonable, well, then reasonably, it probably can work. So I can't prove that God exists. I also can't prove that God doesn't exist. But, well, can nothing create something? Can no thing create something? It's illogical. It's not reasonable. So we have to start off with the reasonable conclusion that probably something created something. Because other things create other things. And if we left back in the, well, where did you come from? Well, I came from my parents. Well, where did your parents come from? My parents came from my parents. Well, where did your parents come from? Well, my parents came from your parents. Well, where did your parents... And we keep on this endless cycle of, well, everything always existed, and it came about by just random chance. I mean, that's really the opposite version of it. You have the atheist story, you have the faith story. The atheist story, nothing created all this. Actually, it didn't create this stuff. It just always happened to be here by mere chance. It's like a hurricane or a tornado sweeping through a garbage mound and then creating a beautiful skyscraper. That's the probability that everything just existed and was here at some point in time. Is that very probable? I don't think that it's very probable that a tornado can rip through a garbage mound and create a skyscraper. It doesn't seem too logical to me. It's more probable that, hey, something, we're just working with, we're calling it something right now, short-term, theologically, like God created everything. We're not even at the person of Jesus Christ yet. Or at least starting with, hey, it's more logical, it's more reasonable, it's more accurate to what we know from history, because history will even tell us, science will even tell us that there was some kind of beginning to everything. It's more probable to believe that there was a intelligent designer, perfection itself, as St. Thomas Aquinas actually called it, contingency itself, his 5 proofs, or what I like to say, his 5 probablys, right? That everything exists because of some divine being, notably God, right? And we start off with this, and then we can move to a place where we can legitimately ask that question, like, okay, there more than likely is some divine creator, there more than likely is a God. It is logical to believe this. It is illogical to believe that nothing created some things, and now we got to deal with these various claims. Well, kings have said that they're God, okay. Emperors have said that they're God, sure. Joe Schmo can say that they're God. Jesus Christ said, I am. So how do we test the validity of that?